everyone, and welcome to the Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. In a world of interconnectedness and constant movement, the concept of knowing your neighbors may seem like a relic of the past. But are there any real dangers that lurk while we remain oblivious to those who dwell beside us? Maybe not. Most people are probably just living their lives. But I'm willing to bet that even in the most serene of neighborhoods, they experience their fair share of unexpected events, unwittingly exposing themselves to unforeseen threats. Because the truth is, even if you think you know someone, how do you know you can trust someone? Connections are made and broken every day. Unsuspecting individuals place their trust in strangers, only to discover horrifying dangers that await them. Gripping accounts of vigilance, fighting for their lives, for simply letting their guard down for a moment. And sure, a misplaced trust can be a fatal mistake, but sometimes, despite the evil one is up against, they beat the odds. They survive, and they thrive, becoming stronger, even wiser than before. So, let's get started, shall we? So, straight up, I made this throwaway account for this because I'm ashamed of my actions. But I'm in over my head, and I really need some help. Just know that karma has thoroughly put me in my place, and my mistake will never be repeated. I live in a small, poor neighborhood, and for 7 years, I've been at war with the old woman next door, Helga. If I have family or friends over, and someone's parked on the curb, she'll call the police. If my dog barked, she'd call the police. That's why I never got another one after Buddy passed. If I play music, she'll call the police. Obviously, nothing came of it, but it was still a pain to deal with. If I put out yard decorations, she'll find a reason to complain. If they aren't somehow offensive, they violate the HOA policy. Fun fact, we don't have an HOA. We're all poor. Everything looks like shit. Hell, there's tinfoil all over her windows. I mean, come on. But she's like that towards everyone. I only get the worst of it because her house is on the corner, and I'm unfortunate enough to be directly next to her. She lived in that house alone for at least 15 or 20 years, according to the other neighbors, and no one has ever seen her have company. Since I moved in, I've only seen her leave 2 or 3 times, but she gets a lot of deliveries. So I figured that she's just ordered everything off Amazon. Because of the tinfoil and her tendency to only come outside at night, we didn't catch many glimpses of her. But when we did, she always seemed kind of dirty and unkempt. A couple years ago, when I still had Buddy, I was walking around the block as Helga collected her boxes, and there was a row of scary tribal masks hanging on the wall behind her. I only saw them for a quick second before she hurried back inside, but I'll never forget the one in the center. The face was long and had a pointed chin, large rectangular teeth. Its eyes were closed in angry slants, and red war paint adorned its head and cheeks. My description truly doesn't do it justice. Its menacing expression made it seem alive. The guy who lives across from her, Joe, was coming home late one night, like 3 a.m, not expecting anyone to be out, but Helga was standing in the middle of the street, with her arms raised to the sky, wearing a black hooded robe. When the headlights hit her, she started screaming in what sounded like Latin, and Joe thinks that she put a curse on him, because he had a wreck just 3 days later. It totaled his truck. He got banged up a little, but could have been much worse. Everyone got really wary of Helga after that, but life moved on without much else happening until 2 weeks ago, when she actually left her house. On the few occasions this has happened, she left after dark and returned before dawn, but on this day, she left at lunchtime. I expected to see her car back the following morning, but it was still gone. She didn't return the next day either, or the next. Meanwhile, her boxes are piling up at the door, and in our neighborhood, they would have been immediately stolen at anyone else's house, but not Helga's. At least not until I couldn't stand the curiosity anymore. This is the part where I'm arguably a huge dick. The logical side of me felt like the boxes probably contained basic household items, toilet paper, trash bags, laundry detergent, but the kid in me couldn't stop thinking about that freaky mask, wondering what else she might collect. I mean, I was gonna put it back, but yeah, I stole a box. One of the big ones, in fact, and I'm still paying for it. I ripped into it like a kid at Christmas, but inside was a large wooden cigar box with a little clasp, a cheap lock. The key was taped to the bottom with a card that read, "Do not open," in bold print. Obviously, I had to open it, but I wasn't immediately certain of what I was looking at. A small glass vial had a lock of hair tied to it with string, and there was a pile of what I believed to be dried out herbs, petals, and something that looked like ashes. Disappointed, I put it all back and threw it in a drawer, for the time being. That night, I was getting ready for bed and I heard a loud crash in the hallway. When I went to check, glass was all over the floor from a broken picture frame. The frame hadn't fallen, the glass had just shattered. I couldn't find anything that might have hit it. I live alone, I don't have any pets. The best I could guess was some kind of hot to cold, or is it cold to hot, reaction, even though I experienced absolutely no temperature changes myself. The next night, I had awful nightmares, where I heard someone fumbling around in the living room, and I went to check it out. As I reached the end of the hallway, a shadowy stick figure stood with its head barely an inch below the ceiling, and upon seeing me, it rushed towards me at a blinding speed. I stumbled backwards as it shot through me, and I bolted straight up in bed, gasping for breath. I was clammy with cold sweat, and there was a sharp pain in my chest. When I opened my shirt, there was a big red rash in the center of my chest. Freaked out, I went to the bathroom, but when I turned on the lights, I saw the same shadowy stick figure behind me in the mirror. I turned around, screaming, but nothing was there. Likewise, it was gone from the mirror as well. A day or two later, a picture frame fell off the wall, but at least that one didn't break. Then that night, I dreamed the figure was on my ceiling, looking down at me. It turned into black smoke and funneled down my nose and throat like fire. Again, I woke up in a clammy sweat, and now I had a hacking cough as well. The night before last, I woke up to a banging on my closet door that didn't stop until I got up and opened it. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Was the box cursed? Was it a trap? Was someone trying to curse Helga? But I intervened. No one knows where she is. 3 days ago, I went door to door asking if anyone knew where she might be, but the neighbors were as confused as me. Afterwards, I called the police to report a possible missing person. They're looking into it, but the only update I've received was to say that they couldn't find any relatives or friends. They're pursuing other avenues. I've already put the package back, but I feel like I messed up really bad. I have no clue how to break a curse, and I can't even Google it without knowing what kind it is. Does anyone have any idea what the deal is with that freaky box or the shadow thing? I've decided to share my story as a cautionary tale for anyone who happens to live in an area with high crime rates. My husband was a first-year surgical intern when we got married in 2012, and I'm a hairstylist, so needless to say, we weren't making much money. We wanted to get our own place so badly that we settled for a small, cheap house in a bad area. We'll get cameras and fix it up. It'll be romantic. We told ourselves all the usual lines, made it sound like an adventure. Well, I guess in a way it was, just not the kind we wanted. Anyone in the medical field will know the hours are insane, but interns are a next level of extreme. When they're not working, they're on call. But even when they're not on call, most of them are still at the hospital, trying to get in extra labs or just hoping for an opportunity to get hands-on experience. We were too young and naive to consider these factors when buying that house. Had we understood how often I would be spending the nights alone, things would have been handled differently. 2 weeks into living there, I took Ben's dinner to the hospital, and when I got back home, one of the windows was broken. Not wanting to go inside, I called the police and waited for them at the convenience store. After they checked the house, I discovered our TVs, along with our iPads, computers, most of our kitchen appliances, had been stolen. It was heartbreaking. We couldn't afford to replace any of it right away. I've never had anything like that happen to me, and this was a small incident by comparison. We got a few things back over the next couple of weeks as people tried to pawn certain items, but most of it was gone forever. We really couldn't afford anything like ADT, but we got a few cameras. Not that they helped. It's just the best we could do. A few months later, I was home alone for the night watching TV when there was a loud bang in the kitchen. I looked into the other room to see a man in a black ski mask standing before the open back door. He had just kicked it in. We made eye contact for a brief second before he charged at me. I took off towards the front door, but too slow. As I tried to unlock it, the man grabbed me from behind, threw me to the floor. I was screaming the whole time, but that's when he kicked me, and I immediately went silent. There was this huge bruise across my side for weeks. I'll never forget that level of pain and fear. I genuinely thought I was gonna die. I couldn't think at all. I was just acting on pure instinct. The guy began looking around the room like he was searching for something, and my hand shot under the couch where I had stashed one of my old softball bats. Worried that I wouldn't be able to generate as much force with a swing, I rammed the end into his crotch. He dropped to his knees with an awful cry. When I tried to run, he grabbed my ankle, and I fell back onto the ground. As he pulled me towards him, I turned, swinging the bat as hard as I could, without knowing where it would strike. But it connected with the side of his face, sent him sprawling backwards. When my ankle was free of his grasp, I ran out of the open back door and called 911. I was so frightened that I hid in my neighbor's bushes until they arrived, but the guy was long gone by then. It won't surprise you to learn that he was never caught. I doubt the police even looked. That neighborhood wasn't exactly a high priority for them. But yeah, I couldn't stay there after that. So Ben and I lived with my parents for almost a year while we sold the house and got a new place. This time we waited until we could afford to live somewhere we felt safe, and we're very happy about that now. Just be careful when you're making those kinds of decisions. Don't let silly things get in the way of smart choices. When I was 17, my dad was the manager of a movie theater, and I worked for him during my summer break. This was back in the 80s when people still got paper checks, and I would sometimes hand them out. During my first time doing this, I had one left over. It was for an old man that retired the previous week, and he had had some health problems, so Dad asked me to run it by the guy's house to save him the bus trip. It got me off work a little early, and he lived close by, so that was fine with me. I got there and knocked on each door for a solid 5 minutes, but no one answered. I had to drive back up the road to call my dad from a payphone. just to ask if I could leave it in the mailbox instead. He didn't like that idea very much and insisted that the man was definitely home, but probably asleep. I really wasn't happy about the prospect of knocking on this guy's windows, but my dad is a hard man to argue with. So I hurried back to get it over with. I tried the doors again first, just in case, but still had no luck. Made my way to the backyard. Upon identifying the window supposedly belonging to the bedroom, I pressed my face to the glass and began tapping lightly, but stopped abruptly when 2 cats bolted away at the sound. They had been crouched over something, but it took a moment for my eyes to recognize the bulky shape on the floor as a person. I could only see him from the waist down. He wasn't moving. Thinking he must have fallen recently, I tried the window, and it opened easily beneath my hands. That's when the smell hit me. There's nothing in the world like it. It's kind of sweet, but rotten at the same time. And I mean sweet in the worst way possible, for sure. Using my shirt to cover my mouth and nose, I stuck my head in just far enough to confirm what I already knew. The old man was dead. But not only that, the cats had begun eating away at his face. His lips, nose, and ears, they'd been gnawed away to the bone. I couldn't get away fast enough. Slamming the window shut, I raced back to the payphone to call the police, and then my dad. He got there a few minutes after the ambulance, and I went home. I had seen and smelled more than enough for a lifetime. We later learned that the man died of a stroke, either the same night or the morning after his retirement gathering, so he'd been there for a solid 6 days. His cats had one of those automatic feeders and water bowls, so they probably had food for the first couple of days, but once they ran out, well, I had nightmares that whole summer, and even though it's been nearly 40 years now, I still remember that smell and the look of his disfigured face like it was yesterday. I'll tell you what though, Dad never sent me to another employee's house again, and these days, I don't show up anywhere without calling first. This took place about 12 to 13 years ago. I was 18 when this happened, but I swear I remember it as clear as most days recently. On this particular night, I was a designated sober driver, as I had recently broken my hand playing rugby, and after I had made my last drop-off around 1 a.m., I decided I'd call it a night. As I was driving home, I was approaching a local historic house reserve, and outside of this house was what appeared to be a hitchhiker. I obviously thought this was weird as hell, because being rugby season, it was pretty damn cold at 1 a.m., and due to the recent spat of break-ins in the area, I honestly considered picking up this hitchhiker because I thought that they would be safer crashing at my parents' for the night than on the streets of Belfast, Christchurch. As I got closer to this hitchhiker, I got a look at their face. Now this is gonna sound bizarre, and it's difficult to explain clearly, but the best I can do is liken the face to an old, brown, leathery volleyball type thing. I felt my blood run cold, literally, as I quickly accelerated away. After a couple of seconds, I looked in my rearview mirror, and there was nothing there. Now, proper scared, I practically raced home. Once I got inside, I saw my parents just about to go to bed. My mom says, "Are you okay, Isaac? You look like you've seen a ghost." I was just, funny you say that, as I recounted what I had just experienced. A couple of weeks later, I was having a conversation with my mom about some other bullshit that I can't remember nowadays, but she mentions that she told my uncle about what I had said. I was told about the apparent story of a hitchhiker that had been murdered after being picked up from outside that house. Now, I'm unsure if that's true at all, but the whole thing made me think differently about the idea of ghosts. I never believed before this night, and now I do. Anyhow, that's my story. Cheers. My mother had slipped and fractured her hip, so she was in the hospital for a while. During her time in the hospital, I would visit her in the evenings until closing time, and then go home. During that time, I struck up conversations with a younger male who I assumed was also visiting family in the hospital. It would always be just the two of us at about 10 p.m. at night, bidding each other goodnight in the hospital car park. One night, I came out of my mother's room to meet him at the lifts on my way down. As we had shared snacks and recognized each other in various waiting rooms, I thought nothing of it when he offered me an unopened can of pop, as he was already also sipping on one. Before stepping into the lift, I opened my can and took a sip. By the time we reached the car park, I had drunk about a third of my drink. Suddenly, my whole body just went numb. I felt like I couldn't swallow, blink, breathe, or even walk. I felt like my body had shut down. I watched as I sat myself on the ground, supporting myself on the man's leg. He told me to sit and wait for him, that he would get his car and drive me around to the emergency room doors. I was panicking, but I couldn't speak, just weakly nodded while struggling to breathe. I lay on the asphalt as his car pulled up, and he helped me into the front passenger seat of the car. It was a white, long car, station wagon type, and he kindly put the passenger seat back so I could lay back and rest. I drifted in and out of sleep trying to work out why we had not yet arrived at the emergency doors. I don't drink alcohol anymore, but I've been extremely drunk before, and this is exactly how I felt now. I could not speak, my thoughts were jumbled, and my body was just not cooperating. I kept opening my eyes, and I could see light shining out of tall building windows as they flew past, but I couldn't squint or focus to properly recognize which part of the hospital these buildings belonged to. I then fell asleep. I was woken after a while because I was being rocked from side to side. I reached over to steady myself, and I touched a wall with knobs. Confused, I tried opening my eyes. I realized that I had touched the knobs of a car radio. As I slowly refocused my thoughts and tried to work out where I was, I suddenly felt extremely nauseous. I knew that I would need to throw up immediately if the rocking didn't stop. As I turned my head to the right, I felt a stream of cold air blowing directly on my face, and that calmed my stomach a bit, but the rocking didn't stop. Before I could say or mumble anything, I started throwing up. The car stopped, and the next thing I knew, I was dragged onto the ground by a pair of hands. I lay on my stomach, heaving and retching on the ground, and realized I was looking into pure darkness. I smelled dead leaves, I smelled soil, I smelled grass. The night air was cool and welcoming, and I was no longer rocking, so I felt better. Suddenly, I was jerked to my feet and pulled to the back of the car. The boot opened and I climbed in and laid down. The car then took off again, rocking and bumping. I had so much saliva drooling out of my mouth. I was sick again, but nothing else came out except for the sick, sweet aftertaste of that pop at the back of my throat. Sometime later, I woke up and slowly pulled myself up and peered over the back seat. We were driving along a dark lane lined with trees. Pitch black. As I rested my head on the back of the seat while dry heaving, I tried to focus and work out where we were. All of a sudden, I see a row of lights behind a row of trees to my left. They suddenly disappear, but give my muddled mind enough time to think, why are we driving in a ditch? After some more driving, the car swings into a little lane to our left and comes to a halt, and the headlights and engine are switched off. The front door opens and slams. I lie there trying to open my eyes and focus, but I'm so dizzy. I feel like my eyes are whipping from side to side, so I keep them closed. I tell myself not to fall asleep again as I struggle to get my mind and my body to cooperate with my will. It's like I'm trying to will myself to sober up. Another me is sober, but my mind and body have not yet caught up. I slide over the back seat and I lie down on the floor immediately behind the driver's seat. There is a metal bar that runs across the back of the front seat of the car, but with enough crawl space underneath. I press my face to it. It's cool and welcoming. I wait for the driver to open any of the car doors. I have no idea where he is. I fall asleep again. I slowly wake up again to the smell of cigarette smoke. I know he's near, but I don't know where. Suddenly, the boot opens. I'm not a petite female by any means. I'm 5'8", 85 kilograms in weight. Somehow, I crawl, slither into the front seats. The next door that opens is the back door, and that slams shut too. I slip my legs back under the bar and slither back onto the floor behind the driver's seat again, just as the front door opens. I can't open my eyes or lift my head, because if I do, everything will start spinning, and I'll need to throw up again. Suddenly, the driver's door opens, and I hear the sound of a metal baseball bat getting pulled out from somewhere near my head, and the door slamming shut. The driver's door opens again, and music starts blaring very loudly from inside the car. Suddenly, the body of the car starts getting whacked loudly by the baseball bat. There are loud thumps around the car, and they keep going around and around the car. They stop. After a while, the driver's door opens and the music stops. My ears are ringing. I realize the driver's door has not closed again, nor has the car sunk with the weight of someone getting into the car. Suddenly, the boot opens again. I somehow slither back into the front, but this time, I slide halfway out the driver's door, which is still open. As I slowly slide under the car, I hear the back door on the passenger side open. I slide under the car, out of breath, breathing in dirt, dust, and soil. I swallow some. I'm stuck between two wheels, under a car, eating dirt, dizzy as hell. Once again, I have to remind myself to stay awake. I slowly pull myself forward. My arms hurt. My face is being dragged through the dirt, and I realize I have somehow lost my shoes. I want to stay under the car forever and just sleep. But the other me keeps yelling for my body and my mind to match my will. So I keep sliding forward. As I get to the front, I get stuck. There's no more space. As I stretch my arms forward, the car engine starts. I hear the driver door slam. I suddenly have this burst of energy where I scurry and slither to the right and come out near the front passenger door. I keep slithering forward and find the earth in front of me giving way to nothing. I keep moving forward and slide into a ditch hole. I slide forward. I feel the earth get harder and start to rise again. So I slide back in the ditch. The car is still there, and the music comes on again. I hear whacks on the side of the car. I hear whacks on the ground. I hear the baseball bat thrown to the ground. Suddenly, I hear my phone ring. I hear him mutter in a language I don't understand. I hear him whack something hard with the baseball bat. It makes a pinging sound. My phone stops ringing. I hear him grunting and stomping, and I hear him whacking things. Suddenly, the vehicle revs its engine, the door slams, and it moves. It reverses and goes away. I peer over the dirt back to where I came from, and I can't see anything. I can't focus on anything. My eyes are still swinging wildly. I close them again. I realize I need to move along the ditch to the left, as that's where I saw a row of lights. I still hear the music. Even though far, it's not going anywhere. It's still playing in the distance somewhere. I start dry heaving again. My mouth is dry, Tastes terrible. My breath stinks. I get up to walk. I fall down. I'm facing my left before the hard, pebbly rise of the ditch is on my right now. I touch it, support myself. I focus on the feel of the pebbles as I walk towards the row of lights. Suddenly, the music is back, loud. I sit down and I lean my back against the hard feel of pebbles and open my eyes and focus on the lights coming towards me. But they move past from my right to my left. I watch it swing in behind a thin row of shrubs on my left. I hear him get out, whack his way towards where I am. I throw myself back into the dirt. The whacking stops. The door slams. The music goes back to where it came from. I keep moving along the ditch, the rise to my right, and the music constantly keeps moving back and forth on my left. I eventually can walk without being pulled to my left and falling over. My eyes are finally staying open longer. My mind starts telling me that it's safer for me with this person I know than me heading towards some unknown. I don't know how many times I believed he was looking for me to take me home, to save me. I was just too exhausted to walk towards the music and the light, so I just kept stumbling along. Suddenly, the music left and left for good. The sky was becoming gray. I started shivering. I sat down, shivering, and fell asleep. I woke up cold, wet, and could see. I looked around and realized I was in a field or forest with trees and shrubs and a dirt road that ran along where I was facing. I slowly got up and started shivering again, and I started to climb the rise. It got slippery as the pebbles slipped under my feet. Suddenly, I felt fear, deep fear. I panicked and clambered, screaming and crying up the slope. I got to the top and realized I was on train tracks. I quickly crossed over and went down the other side. I was so scared, so scared of being found and picked up by this person again. I kept walking. How long? I don't know. All the while, my mind would jump between listening with paranoia to my surroundings, then trying to recall every little detail of the night. I realized my handbag, car keys, details of where I lived, everything were most likely in his car. All I knew of him was his name, Francis. My mind went blank. I just walked, penniless, without ID and shoes, and guess what? Stinking of piss and shit. Suddenly, in front of me was a collection of houses. I waited in the bushes for some time, scared shitless of all people, sure that they would hand me back to the person who did this to me. It took me a while to approach this lady who did not ask questions, but allowed me to call my sister to come pick me up. She allowed me to wash my face and wait in her house until my sister arrived. She never asked anything. I was thirsty as hell, but water just tasted horrible. My sister arrived, pissed as fuck. She wanted to know what happened. She wanted me to go to the police. I told her I was exhausted. She told me I stank. She asked about my car. I lied, said that it had been stolen, purse and all. I could hardly speak. I asked if I could sleep at her house. I had a shower. I drank a cold beer in 3 gulps. No idea why I wanted a beer. And I went to bed. I woke up that night, called my mother, told her I wouldn't be visiting anymore. I felt terrible, emotionally, physically. I felt so hungover and exhausted. I slept for 3 days. My sister kept asking what happened until she gave up. We never really speak of that time. I don't think we ever will. I picked up my car from the hospital car park a month later. No parking fees, thank goodness. I filed a police report, but other than that, I never told anyone. My best friend and her husband moved me out of my place, back in with my mom a week later. I resigned from my job. This happened in 1993, and this is the first time that I've spoken of it. I still feel fear, but not as bad. It's when I ask myself, what if? That's when I go numb. Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode. Thanks for joining me. Whether it's your first time or you're a regular, your support means the world over here. We've got brand new episodes every Friday night. Keep those eyes open long enough for those deep sleep videos, and of course, double features. Subscribe, tap the bell, and you'll never miss a thing. Big thanks to those who shared their stories, and a huge shout out to all of my patrons, whom we appreciate so very much. Tracy S, Tamara K, Monica L, ZoeWatt, Chelle B, Donald C, The Dark Cosmos, Marion T, Rat Girl, Alisha S, Erin G, Nikki H, Mr. Revenant, Naz K, Brendon G, Paul T, Nicholas C, Lissane, Arlene F, and Adrienne. If you want to support The Darkest Hour in other ways, consider joining my Patreon. Check out patreon.com/thedarkesthour, or click the link in the description to learn more. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com, or on the Darkest Hour subreddit, The Darkest Hour YT. Stay spooky.